Okay, we're ready. Praise Yahweh. So please stand and we'll reverence Yahweh and begin our class. Our great and awesome Father, whose name is Yahweh, this is Kohan Betzalel, coming before you as a seat of the witness Israel, through our most Ahab, ruler, king, and leader and teacher over us all, to come to Yahweh forever, Yahshua Messiah. We're thankful for the lesson you've given us to be taught today, Father Yahweh. I pray that you would inspire the listening and hearing to each and every person this day that is able to hear, and that these lessons would impress upon us the valuable lessons we need for our lives, that which will deliver the whole universe from the destruction of sin. In all things we give you thanks and praise in unity as a body of priests, through the last day's witness Israel Hawkins, and through our high priest Yahshua Messiah, we bless you. Hallelujah, Yahweh. Praise Yahweh. You can be seated. We're in the 5th book of Israel, Kingdom of Priests. Chapter 25, page 209. This sermon was given in the 10th Roman month of 2005. And something I want you to bear in mind, because we're up to the year 2020 now, is that you can look at these, read these as historical records or history of the House of Yahweh established in the last days. And if you take the time to review the narratives from the scriptures that talks about the experiences that the house of Yahweh went through in the early days, you'll start to see parallels to this work. You see that people waited. They waited on Yahweh. Yahweh made them promises. Yahweh fulfilled those promises, not always in their lifetime. People were disgruntled, dissatisfied, fearful. They wondered, they asked questions. They didn't always understand the plan of Yahweh in their time, or the plan of Yahweh at a future time that they heard about but hadn't yet experienced. We see this in the children of Israel coming out of Egypt through their experiences, and many other examples in scriptures, even in the time of Noah, when he gave warning to the people and they didn't have anything to really tangible to put their finger on. You know, it's like building a boat in Kansas or some central state far from water. You know, it just didn't make sense to them. And so we can take these lessons and keep in mind that what we experience now, others have experienced at other times in scriptures, and we can look to those as examples and see the outcome. It's like Pastor pointed out this morning, the prophecies that have already been fulfilled, and the populating of the nation of Israel for the last days, prophecies to be fulfilled. Yahweh has always shown his word to be faithful and true. Okay, so what it means to rejoice at the feast, and this is number 4 in the series, so we're still on the subject of rejoicing. You must come to the burning bush to acknowledge Yahweh and protect your health. Now, if we go back and we review our lessons on the burning bush and the meanings of that, we see that that is a source of knowledge, is the source of knowledge, the house of Yahweh. To acknowledge Yahweh. Now, the word acknowledge means to accept or admit the existence or truth of. So it could be something, but in this case, it's Yahweh. And this is what we see in the world today, and what was talked about this morning is that at this time, those that are not being called by Yahweh do not accept or admit the existence or the truth of Yahweh, to their own downfall. and to protect your health. If we go back to chapter 5 in this book, and there's many other places you could go, but I picked this one because it's in this book. In chapter 5, verse 13 of this fifth book of Israel, halfway down in verse 12, it says, I don't think they'll ever find out what Yahweh knows about the human body. Well, that's an understatement. He created it, right? I think it would probably take 1 billion years, and they still wouldn't understand. They're hiding things through their own sins. 1 Kepha 5:9. Resist her by remaining firm in the faith, knowing that the same afflictions are fully endured by your brothers in the world. This is talking about these motions of sin. It's translated afflictions here, but the same word is used for the motions of sin in Romans 7, verse 5. We translated it here differently, but that's the way that King James had it. So what he's talking about here in these motions of sin, this is what we're seeing, and this is what we suffer in the world today, in the sense of, or in the context of guarding our health, okay? We're still affected by the sins of this world and the things that affects them, and these are transmissible diseases that get into us, and some are hard to get rid of. Now, Pastor begins with an article, and he's conveying the idea here of do not be deceived. So he's covering this article that was pertinent at this time, something that he had seen for some reason he wanted to bring to our attention. And the message that he wanted to get across to us here is that I don't want you to start thinking you're safe in sinning. Because these articles will come out and say, well, do you have this affliction or that affliction? Well, you can take this, it's like a magical cure or something, and get rid of it. And like he pointed out today with the corona, it's getting into the brain. Well, some things you can take through the digestive tract, and it'll take care of a few things, but it's much more difficult to get into the brain where that thing is, even though the substance itself might be an inhospitable environment for that bacteria or virus. How do you get it to where it's hiding in your body? You see, so these are not the ultimate answers, though they can help. If sin is at the root, as Jeremiah 30, verse 15 says, there are no healing medicines, and that was also spoken this morning, referred to. But the point Pastor wants us to understand here, and that he makes throughout this sermon, is whatever you're given with the knowledge and understanding of Yahweh to use to protect your health, use it the way Yahweh says. He says, he makes reference to how Yahweh created everything. So he's the ultimate authority on these choices. Yahweh tells you, you see, so we need to be listening. Then he makes reference to water, and water contains many different elements. And this is a characteristic of water. And it's referred to as the universal solvent, because there are so many things in the environment and the elements that will dissolve in water. But water is not just H2O, two hydrogens and an oxygen atom. And just like air is not just oxygen, contains nitrogen and other elements. And the laws are not just the 10 Commandments. And it's not just your particular most honored law that you might like to use to put others in their place. There's more to it. There's all of the laws. And anything altered from the way Yahweh made it for you will be lacking in some way, or it can do harm. Like Yahweh tells you, like Yahweh tells Israel Hawkins in the Holy Scriptures, this is what he pays attention. What Yahweh tells you, this is what we ought to be listening to above anything else. Everything has to be measured according to Yahweh's laws and his wisdom. If you use it the way Yahweh says, then you'll get the benefit you need from it. If you continue in sin, however, it won't help. It's like a little leaven. Leaven's the whole lump in Galatians 5:9. We have this understanding that even a little sin will grow and spread into a greater presence in your life. Do it the way Yahweh says, then you won't go wrong. Yahweh made it, and he tells you how to use it. So whether it was something relevant in this time, he goes into the benefits of honey. That's been brought out by some of the sermons and the lessons. But the important thing is, whatever Yahweh gives us in our time, there could be things yet coming we haven't even discovered yet, because of the times we're living in and the certain events taking place that we're going to need protection from. Whatever knowledge Yahweh brings to his house, then we need to treat it with the seriousness that it is worthy of. Now, it's desirable to have the things that Yahweh created in their original form, but because of those motions of sin in the world, that's not even always available to us now because of the defilement of the earth. But Yahweh said that he would do a work in this time even greater than that in the time of Mosheh. So we need to trust Yahweh to come through for us when it's beyond our capability of dealing with. Yahweh will step in and preserve us for his purposes. Having a healthy immune system is very beneficial. The last year of these final 2 years, when it's very likely that supplements, and I put will be difficult to get. That's just, he's used another word there that gives a degree of uncertainty, but no, he knows it will be difficult. So we need to be doing like Yosef did and prepare for what we know is coming, what we need. He also comments in verse 20 about the bird flu and how it hits the respiratory system, and what are we dealing with today with the corona, affecting the respiratory system, among other things. This one's worse, right? As the prophecies also foretold. So we need to take steps necessary to maintain a healthy body. Like, don't overindulge, be moderate, like Yahweh says, and don't treat yourself like a dumpster, okay? For those over the pond, that's the wheelie bin. Don't treat yourself like a medical experiment. I've seen people do that, and they just, let's just try this and, see what occurs. Well, Yahweh hasn't left us in ignorance. So be respectful to your own body. That's a character trait, because all of these things that we do to maintain our health is really at its fundamental core a character issue. It involves self-control, it involves respect. And it's not just one thing, but it's a combination. It's not just one law, it's a combination of all the laws that produce their effect. They work together for the body, the physical body and the spiritual body. The way Yahweh made it for us, and the way he, you'll always hear pastor comes from the laws. It's going to be healthy, safe, and beneficial. Now, if man has corrupted it and adulterated it in the meantime, well, then we're going to have to deal with that. That's going to be a problem. That's why our salvation is so important, as it says in Matthew 24, that if Yahweh doesn't intervene, no flesh should be saved alive. So we work with what we can, what we have, the best of our ability, all the while trusting and believing Yahweh. He's continuing to talk about, not relying on just one thing. And he mentioned a couple of things in combination here around verse 43. Just an important principle to keep in mind. I think we've covered that pretty well. So Yahweh made us so we can think, I'm at verse 46. So Yahweh created man. He's our creator. He made you so you can think, use similitudes, compare, and know if something is healthy or unhealthy. We have the ability to train and be educated, whether it's suitable or unsuitable. And the trouble with the world is they can't learn because they're cut off from Yahweh. As I said, they do not acknowledge Yahweh. They don't accept or admit the existence or the truth of Yahweh. And this is where their problems arise from. They're not willing to hear Yahweh's instruction in order to obey. Did you hear what I said? They're not willing to hear Yahweh's instruction in order to obey. As many before me have said, just sitting in services is not enough. You can't just come and hear the instruction without the desire to obey. And if there's a lack of understanding, then there needs to be a desire to seek understanding. With that point of reference that Yahweh is true, just. So then he goes into the creation and how Yahweh created everything along with man according to their kind. And this is very important because man is not, we're made in the likeness, being made in the likeness and image of Yahweh. We're not made after the animal kind. Every winged bird according to its kind, and Yahweh saw it was fitting. And Yahweh blessed them and said, be fruitful and multiply, fill the waters in the sea, and let the birds multiply in the earth. So the evening and the morning were the fifth day. Then Yahweh said, let the earth bring forth living creatures according to its kind, of the cattle and the creeping things, so forth. Then Yahweh said, I will make, and this is a process, remember, I will make man in my image, according to my likeness. They will have, when they're qualified, when they've been trained, when they're prepared to do this, they will have rulership over, and Pastor goes on to explain, everything he created for mankind. So this is part of the great plan of Yahweh. The problem with the universe and the problem with Yahweh's original sons who created planets throughout the universe is that they had the same thing, but they, like mankind, let illegal lust prevail. Remember I said at the root and core of these problems is a character issue. They started selling pus in their milk and using antibiotics throughout their bodies, their environment, trying to keep down the bacteria. In other words, whatever it was that they did, they tried to alleviate the curse that came from sin without stopping the sin. You see the point? And so to drive this point home a little harder and more completely, I'd like to turn the class over to our next teacher. Please stand and present Great Khan Kanath Hawkins. Praise Yahweh.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Please be seated. I'm going to go ahead and pick up right there where the great Kohan left off at, because one of the things that I do want to emphasize, and he did a great job of it, showing how Pastor has always taught us, just the basics of mankind. the things that we should be doing each and every day, to bring forth health, not overdoing it, but basic things. He talked a little bit before that about the importance of buttermilk. And of course, even if you look back at verse 38, Pastor says you need eggs, meat, milk, and butter. Yes, you do need these things. You don't need them off the grocery store shelf. And how important is that? We need it. We need to be self-sustainable, as we've been doing for years, and of course we're getting greater and greater at it. So what I wanted to do was continue down there in verse 54, where the great Kohan read, and I'd like to just re-emphasize it. Pastor says after reading Genesis 1:26, everything he created for mankind. The problem with the universe and the problem with Yahweh's original sons, and we did see that even earlier today in the sermons that were given, who created planets throughout the universe, was they had the same thing, but they, like mankind, let illegal lust prevail. And that's what the great Kohan was, when he went back, that was really great, going back to chapter 5 about the motions of sin. Because these are the things, when we take Yahweh's laws completely out of, almost you could say, out of context by putting our own take on things, a lot of times it doesn't bring forth, well, it's not going to bring forth righteousness, but it doesn't bring forth any peace in someone's life. Now, in verse 55, the way Pastor worded this is very important. Pastor says, the ones Yahweh made, okay, the ones Yahweh made, and then I think he probably paused, you being the remnant of the great kingdom of Yahweh. He's putting the emphasis on us and the fact that we are this remnant. We're going to bring forth Yahweh's will and plan to the very end. We're going to take positions that are going to be great. I'm sure a lot of us, even like myself, I kind of wonder how we're going to take care of, I think it was mentioned this morning about, teachers for 1 million people. We're going to have to do it just the way that Pastor has done it here. We're going to have to delegate duties and responsibilities, and believe me, it will be done. But Pastor goes on to say, you being the remnant of the great kingdom of Yahweh are going to clean up the earth. That's our commission. We're going to do it through the laws of Yahweh. Now, drop down to 56, and Pastor says, the very tiny enzymes, and of course he's getting into microorganisms, and I mean, this was back in 2005. We know a whole lot more today about the microscopic world through the teachings of Pastor than what we did back then. But listen to what he says. He says, the very tiny enzymes, I was telling you about silver. If you look at silver, that's not kept clean. You see tarnish, on the silver. That tarnish is little dead bugs and their elimination. The silver grabs them and kills them. They build up on your silver. If you don't clean it, it will get to looking so filthy you won't want to eat with it. And I can remember my mother had a set of silver, and the only time we took it out was on special occasions. And I'm talking about in the way of knives, spoons, and forks. And it was always a situation that when we took it out, we had to clean it. And it was just like what Pastor said, that's the way Yahweh created silver. It collects all of these bad microscopic things, and that eliminates a lot of that going into our mouth and into our digestive system when you look at it that way. That's the way that Yahweh created it, to help us not to intake so much And of course, if you carry silver, on you, it is something that does help the body to also ground better with the earth. And of course it emits a frequency, and I'm sure it's a frequency that's very beneficial to your health. But let's drop down to verse 61. Pastor says, Yahweh is our rock. Yahweh is unmovable. This is what you have to become and what he shows you right here. And he's going to actually go into the definition there. And, we'll just continue on. You have to be strong and not changing any part of Yahweh's plan and not let it ever be changed again. It's changed now. We can see the results of it right here. And it's causing death. The deaths are increasing along with every sin. And of course, we see that today in the fact of the coronavirus. And like Pastor even brought out that information today, a lot of this is, of course, we've already been told and taught that this coronavirus was from the beginning. And now we're starting to understand now why a lot of it is coming out through the things that Pastor brought out about the fact that it's in the ice, in these great icy masses. And now as the earth starts to warm up to some degree because of sin, we're going to see these things come out, and they're going to be much worse than what they were yesterday. They're going to continually get worse and worse and worse. And think about that second plague when he said that about the death in the waters. Look at verse 62. Pastor says, I can't cover all of this, but if you would write down or look it up in the concordance, you will see the meaning of the word rock. You will see esteem the rock of our salvation. And this is what I got highlighted, the unmovable Yahweh. And if you get your mind set in that way, in the way of standing up for the laws of Yahweh and the teachings of the House of Yahweh, and especially the prophecies that have been brought out by the House of Yahweh, we have to be unmovable in these things. We can't put our spin on it. We need to do just what we're taught, and that way the laws of Yahweh will bring peace and joy and abundant living. He goes on to say in this definition, he who never changes, Yahweh says, this is what it's referring to this whole time, the rock that beget us in Deuteronomy 32:18, except the rock had sowed them in 32:30, for their rock is not our rock. Who is Yahweh? It's not a stone that you lay your head on. It's a stone you fill your head with. Remember that from yesterday and let it stick with you, the rock in whom they trusted. The rock in whom they trusted was not Yahweh. We have to trust in Yahweh. Okay, who is Yahweh? Then it was used also in Book 2 by the apostles in Yeshua in the same manner. And he goes on to say, many of these things there, I would like to read them, but I don't have time to do so. And it's so true, because he goes into the burning bush. If you haven't read this sermon, this is a very great sermon to read on Sabbath, because it's very, very detailed and basic information. It's like the burning bush. And of course, we know the world doesn't know that the burning bush is the house of Yahweh, but we know that. We've come here. Now, dropping down, go to verse 66. In Judges 9:15, Pastor says, the brambles said to the trees, and this was such a great explanation, of those scriptures. You could tell that this is information that is truly inspired. Pastor says, now get this. This is a bush talking to the trees. And think about that. And then it goes on to say in verse 69, and that would be the latter part of that verse 15, and Pastor reads it, then let war come out of the bramble and consume the cedars of Lebanon. And of course, this is just still talking about the bramble bush being the house of Yahweh. But the thing I wanted to point out there is the cedars of Lebanon, when you read about it, they were tremendous in height, and the house of Yahweh is always so small, all through Yahweh's plan. But going back to verse 66, Pastor says, this is a picture, a scenario of the house of Yahweh talking to the uplifted trees, which are 100 times taller than this little bramble bush that sits on the ground. This is the bush describing the house of Yahweh as being very small. And again, for the sake of time, it would be great for you to be able to read those verses that we're going to have to pass up. But go to verse 72. Pastor says in Deuteronomy 4:20, but as for you, Yahweh has taken you and brought you out of the iron melting pot. Now think about the benefits of silver, and Pastor's going to tell us about some other benefits here. The iron melting pot can represent two things. Yahweh called us out of the melting pot of sin. Think about the motions of sin, okay? Into the melting pot of the house of Yahweh to be what? To be purified. Yes, it's a struggle. It's almost a day-to-day struggle in doing those things in order to continually keep your mind focused on being righteous, but we're purifying ourselves in doing so, okay? Now let's, well, I don't want to pass that up. Pastor says, let me read you the correct translation of this scripture to make it clear. But as for you, Yahweh has taken you and brought you out of his house in order to purify and strengthen you from sin with this judgment. Yes, the house of Yahweh will cleanse us with the laws of Yahweh as with water. Okay, now drop down to verse 73, and he starts talking about cast iron here, and the benefits of cast iron and cooking in cast iron. In verse 73, cast iron is spoken of in the scriptures. It's a great thing to use for cooking. It gets you the iron you need without taking, of course he mentions geritol here to go with it. It gets you the right amount of iron. And that's one thing that's so important about this, and the great Kohan said it earlier. If you do things in the way that the teaching of the house of Yahweh is, you won't get too little of it, and you won't get too much of it. Okay, if you read in the beginning of the sermon, he talks about colloidal silver. And, Pastor says in that taking of colloidal silver, you can do very great damage to your body when taken in excess. Okay, but Pastor says there are other things that are used in cast iron that actually benefit the food and make it usable. That could be a sermon in itself. There's some great knowledge there if you want to study that along with silver. Okay, and again, for time's sake, let's see here. In verse 77, he says, I felt grief in my heart when I saw on the news that people are begging the doctors for longer lives and ones that are not filled with diseases. This whole world is sick, and of course the medicinal and the medical community is not bringing forth help. They're begging the wrong way. They ought to be hunting the burning bush and begging for it. They were asked, how long do you think we should live, or how long would you like to live? Most of them said at least 100 years old, and one of them said 150. I thought, well, why not forever? It's great when you just look at the basics of what the house of Yahweh has taught us. You know what? If it's not forever, it's not here. We don't want it. Okay, now drop down, verse 78, Pastor says, going back to Proverbs 3, A little bit further down in the paragraph, he says, he's talking about knowledge and the great wisdom of Yahweh. So think about it again, knowledge and wisdom. Together they're unbeatable. But the knowledge of the world without the wisdom of the house of Yahweh is bringing forth destruction. Okay? If you study the wisdom of Yahweh, you'll find that there's an answer to every problem we're having here on earth, health-wise and in our relations with other people and nations. And then he talks about the feast here in this next part that's coming up here. In your learning process here, Yahweh is finding out how well you can adjust to getting along with other people and how well you can adjust to working with people. And down at the bottom, the people who stayed humbled themselves and grew with us. They're very, very healthy people, and they get along with people. And of course, at that time, he's talking about the benefits of the feast. For those in our viewing audience that haven't come to a feast of Yahweh, it's a very, very educational thing. It's one thing to see it, on the stream, but you really experience it when you come. Okay. So let's drop down here. He talks about how important the plan of Yahweh is, and in verse 84 he says, verse 5. Now he's talking about Proverbs 3:5. Trust in Yahweh with all your heart and do not lean upon your own understanding. What do you lean on then? You lean on this burning bush like Mosheh did. That's what we have to do. We've got to trust in the house of Yahweh and put all of our efforts into the house of Yahweh. And then he talks about the world not really understanding about Mount Sinai and Horeb. And, now he's got, in verse 89, he says, now here's a correct translation. So drop down to verse 90. Pastor says, Exodus 34:1, Yahweh said to Mosheh, chisel 2 tablets of stone, be ready in the morning and come up in the morning to Abel. How important is it for us to teach the world that righteousness only comes from Abel? Okay, no man, if you drop down to 92 and verse 3, no man shall come to Abel with you, and no man is to come from the great teacher for any reason except those of the congregation who have been examined and found fit. They may come up to Abel before the great teacher to learn. And that's the thing, even on the Sabbath, we prepare ourselves physically and spiritually to come before Yahweh. Now, 93, 94, 95 talks about Pastor's dream of seeing Abel on Yahweh Shema. At verse 98, Pastor's still in Proverbs 3, verse 6, in all of your ways acknowledge Yahweh. How do you do that? In your mind, you have the laws of Yahweh. You know the law. Don't break the Sabbath. You need to be sure you come and do Yahweh's will on the Sabbath and make it a special day of doing Yahweh's will. And we know that by being here at class today. And Pastor goes on about, there's some other things he brought forth about health. And then he talks about, this is something that we need to cover here too. In verse 106, do you know who should be honored? The working man. He's the man who should be honored. They have it all wrong. They should build gold trophies to the working man who brings forth the clean food that you must have to eat. If there was any sanity in the world today, this is who they would be honoring. They would honor people who bring forth clean, healthy, wholesome food and who teach the Holy Scriptures. Those are the ones you need to honor. Let's turn over to page 218. And Well, let's not pass up verse 109. Okay, Pastor says there was a plan to complete the sacrifice of Yahshua, which included building the temple in Jerusalem. That was all brought about. The people of Yahweh were still in Abel. When the others came to Abelin, the first one who was there was Yochanan, and he condemned them. Some of them came out when he was baptizing. Get this into your minds now. This is the history that shows about Jerusalem. Yahweh's people did not run the temple. The temple, the only time that righteousness was taught in the temple in Yeshua's time was when Yeshua went into the temple. Now, this is a very great part of the sermon here, and it talks about what we have here at the house of Yahweh and our location. Look at verse 111. Pastor says, this area right here, they call it Oak Forest. It was a peaceful valley of farmers at one time. The land became so contaminated they couldn't raise anything here. Then Yahweh drove them out. These oak trees, he talks about the oak trees, and of course we're going to have to close it up here, but it'd be great to read about this. But like Pastor says, these oak trees have a sap that cleans the land and kills parasites. Not only that, they say they cleanse the water. And I know Pastor had told us that years ago that groundwater is actually brought up through the root system of these trees, and some of it goes out through evaporation, and guess what? Some of it goes back down into the ground a lot cleaner than what it was when it came into the tree. And we're going to go ahead and end here at 113. Pastor says, these trees bring forth minerals and all kinds of things from down deep in the soil. Then they deposit it through their sap on the ground. This is what cleanses the earth that's underneath them. We have fruit trees and other things planted where these oak trees were, and some even underneath oak trees, and they're bearing fruit that is so delicious it just makes your mouth water. You can go out in the morning and pick a peach, apple, or pear. It's a wonderful thing that Yahweh has done here. And with that, we'll go ahead and I'll ask that everyone please stand. And we'll go ahead and close with prayer. Again, it would be very, very beneficial to read that sermon today. Let's lift our hands in prayer. Most holy and righteous Father Yahweh in heaven, this is Kohan Kanath Hawkins, a seedy anointed servant Yisrayl, who's much ahabed in the sight of your people, your servant Yisrayl, the one whom you have sent in these the last days, and by and through the most honorable and the great high priest, our judge and soon coming king, Yahshua Messiah, asking and praying, Father Yahweh, together with your men, as we pray for your dismissal in this class, that you would allow us to take this knowledge and go forward with it in our very lives and to go in peace. We just bless you and thank you and praise you for everything. All in Yeshua's name we pray, as the seed of Yisrael, being guided by Spirit Holy. Hallelujah, Yahweh. Praise Yahweh.